In Seoul, debt is not just a number on a screen. It is the quiet sigh of a student staring at a payment deadline at midnight. It is the exhausted eyes of an office worker packed into a rush-hour elevator. It is the trembling hands of an elderly person mopping floors before dawn. 3 different lives sharing the same feeling, always trying, always keeping up, and always afraid that one small slip could make everything collapse. People often say Koreans are drowning in debt because they overspend, because they choose a lifestyle beyond their means. But when almost every student, office worker, young family, and even retirees are carrying debt, this is no longer about personal choices. It is a system that pushes people to borrow just to survive. When housing costs outrun income, when education becomes a mandatory race, when appearance directly affects job opportunities, and when wages cannot keep up with daily life, debt stops being a weakness. It becomes a survival reflex. Not everyone wants to borrow, but for many, there is simply no other path. June is 26 years old, freshly graduated with a full-time job and a small room facing a gray concrete wall. He does not buy luxury items to show off. He buys them because he is afraid of being left behind. In South Korea, success is not only about what you do, but how much you look like someone who has made it. On social media, June's friends dress well, drink stylish coffee, and live lives that seem stable and put together. In reality, his salary barely covers rent, food, and monthly payments. Credit cards become the lifeline that helps him breathe from one month to the next. June knows he is borrowing from his future to survive the present, but what other choice is there? If he cuts back, he fears disappearing from an invisible race that everyone is forced into. For June, debt is not driven by ambition, but by the fear of falling behind in a society that never waits for anyone. In South Korea, housing is not just a place to live. It is the line between stability and falling behind. For young people like June, owning or even renting a decent home has become a survival problem. Home prices have risen far faster than wages for years, pushing the dream of stability further out of reach. So people accept a system that sounds clever at first, paying a massive upfront deposit to live without monthly rent. It feels lighter, but in reality, it becomes the first major loan of adulthood. To have a home, you must borrow. To borrow, you must believe your future will be better than your present. But when interest rates rise, when prices fall, or when a job disappears, the foundation of life begins to shake. The fear is not the size of the debt, but knowing that one small slip could cost you the place where you sleep. In South Korea, education is not simply about learning. It is a survival ticket that no family dares to drop. For many parents, the hardest decision is not borrowing for themselves, but borrowing for their children's future. After regular school hours, children move straight into hagwons, private academies glowing with light late into the night. No one calls this a choice, because if your child does not attend, it feels like you are allowing them to fall behind. Parents understand the cost. Tuition bills pile up, loans stretch across years, and evenings are spent silently calculating numbers. Yet the fear of debt is smaller than the fear of not doing enough as a parent. Education here does not just buy knowledge, it buys temporary peace of mind in a ruthless competition. And so, debt becomes part of love, quiet, persistent, and with almost no end in sight.
Unlock
In
your
South
true
Korea,
beauty.
appearance is no
Radiant
longer a
skin
personal choice.
starts here.
It has become a cost
Be
of being
flawless.
seen and
Be
taken
you.
seriously. From a young age, many people are taught that their face, skin, and body can shape job opportunities, income, and even how society treats them. As a result, skincare routines, cosmetic procedures,
And the
and expensive
recovery time
treatments
isn't
are not
long.
viewed as luxuries, but as serious investments in the future. The problem is that not everyone can afford these investments up front. When the pressure to look successful keeps rising, credit cards and installment plans become familiar exits. People do not borrow to become more attractive, but to avoid being pushed out of the game. And in that reality, debt is not born from vanity, but from the fear of being judged as less in a society where appearance is tightly linked to personal value.
There's a truth that is rarely said out loud. Most Koreans do not borrow money to live lavishly. They borrow because their income can no longer keep up with the pace of life around them. Wages grow slowly, contracts are shorter, jobs are unstable, while housing, education, healthcare, and other basic costs quietly rise year after year. People work harder and stay later, yet the feeling of security drifts further away. When every expense rises, but income stands still, debt stops being a tool for getting ahead and becomes a temporary bridge to avoid falling. Each month turns into a mental calculation of what to pay now and what to delay. No one wants to live on borrowed money, but when the system makes labor insufficient to sustain a normal life, borrowing becomes the only reasonable option. And at that point, debt no longer reflects personal failure. It exposes a structure where working hard is no longer enough to live without fear. When stable jobs disappear, many Koreans turn to self-employment, not out of passion, but because there's no other choice left. Mr. Park was once an office worker with a steady paycheck and a modest life. After being laid off, he borrowed money to open a small shop, hoping to save his family on his own. In the beginning, he opened the doors early and closed them late, believing hard work could fix everything. But revenue fluctuated, while loan interest never waited. As customers slowly faded, worry crept into every meal and every sleepless night. Each bill felt like the rope tightening around his neck. He could not close the shop because closing meant admitting failure, yet opening every day only stretched the debt further. In that spiral, self-employment stops being a dream of independence and becomes a survival gamble, where one bad season can erase years of effort and leave an entire family trapped in debt. When traditional banks close their doors, many Koreans step into the most frightening option left: fast loans with crushing interest. In that moment, they are not searching for a solution. They are just trying to survive the month. One tap on a phone, money arrives instantly, faster than fear can settle in. But the cost comes later, quietly and relentlessly. High interest rates, penalties stacked on penalties, every payment cycle becoming a small panic attack. Borrowers begin to avoid their phones, ignore unknown calls, and live with constant tension. Debt stops being a number and turns into a daily presence. What makes these loans truly dangerous is that they do not target the careless, they target the desperate. And once you step inside this spiral, it becomes almost impossible to tell where help ends and the final trap begins.
In South Korea, there is a moment that often makes people fall silent when they see elderly citizens still working from early morning until late at night. Not because they love labor, but because they cannot afford to stop. After a lifetime of work, many enter old age with little savings and debts that were never fully paid off. Pensions are not enough to live on, medical costs continue to rise, and many still carry debt to help their children survive in an increasingly expensive society. On cold winter mornings, they sweep streets, collect trash, and do physically demanding jobs with worn bodies, simply to keep life from collapsing. The deepest pain is not poverty, but the feeling of having tried their whole lives and still being unable to rest. At this point, debt is no longer a financial issue. It becomes an emotional weight, a quiet reminder that even in old age, they are not allowed to be weak. Debt in South Korea is not just a financial issue. It is a mirror reflecting how a society operates and where it places its pressure. When young people borrow to avoid falling behind, parents borrow to protect their children's future,
workers borrow to keep a roof over their heads, and the elderly continue working just to survive, this is no longer personal failure. It is a system where hard work alone is no longer enough to live with peace of mind. The real question is not how large the debt has become, but how many people are living quietly with constant anxiety while pretending everything is fine. This story does not belong only to South Korea. It may be a preview of what awaits many other societies. If you have ever felt like you are running without moving forward, share your thoughts below. And if you want to understand what happens when this debt bomb reaches its limit, stay with us. This story is not over yet.